The gilded cage of Alessandro Ricci's penthouse was a masterpiece of minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic chokehold on Manhattan. But the man himself was a prisoner of his own making. At 34, he was a colossus of finance, a man who could make stock markets tremble with a single bored blink. Yet, the one thing he couldn't buy was peace, specifically the peace from his mother, Signora Ricci. "Alessandro, you are a tragedy in a Brioni suit." Her voice crackled over the speakerphone, a theatrical wail that seemed to reverberate off the cold marble floors. 50 eligible daughters of my friends, and you look at them like they are quarterly reports. Your father is ashamed. I am ashamed. The family name needs an heir, not a spreadsheet. Alessandro pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture his assistant, Julian, had learned to interpret as code red. The annual Ricci family gala was in 3 weeks. It was a blood sport of social climbing, a battlefield of couture gowns and strategic compliments, and his mother would be the ringmaster. The pressure to appear with a respectable, charming, and, most importantly, real girlfriend was immense. The problem was, Alessandro's real girlfriends were usually brief, transactional affairs with models who could barely discuss the weather, let alone hold their own against his mother's withering scrutiny. "Julian," he said, ending the call with a curt tap, "get me the agency, the one that handles arrangements." 2 days later, Alara Vance sat in a stark white waiting room, her heart a frantic hummingbird against her ribs. She was an actress, the kind that got callbacks for Waitress Number 2 and Zombie Number 5. Her bank account was a desolate wasteland, and her landlord was becoming less patient by the day. When her agent had whispered about a highly exclusive, incredibly lucrative booking for a month, she jumped, picturing a lonely tech mogul who needed a date for a few board meetings. She hadn't pictured a young, devastatingly handsome man who looked at her like she was a potential hostile takeover. He was all sharp angles and glacial eyes, his voice a low, controlled rumble that made it clear he was unaccustomed to being challenged. "The contract is standard," he said, pushing a thick document across his glass desk. "Non-disclosure is paramount. You will be Signora Ricci's new best friend. You will know my favorite wine, my non-existent childhood pet, and my profound adoration for chamber music. You will be believable. Your name?" "Alara," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Alara," he repeated, as if testing a new brand. "Pleasant. Unremarkable. It will do. Julian will brief you on everything else." He dismissed her with a flick of his wrist. As she walked out of the office, feeling more like a purchased accessory than a person, she nearly collided with a mountain of a man. He was built like a fortress, all broad shoulders and a quiet, watchful stillness. His face was a study in granite, with a strong jaw and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He was intimidating, yet there was a surprising gentleness in the way he steadied her with a large, warm hand. "My apologies, miss," he said, his voice a low, gravelly hum that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "No, my fault," she mumbled, her cheeks flushing as she noticed the coiled wire in his ear and the faint bulge of a shoulder holster under his impeccably tailored jacket. "This is Luca," Julian said from behind her, the assistant appearing silently. "Mr. Ricci's head of security. He will be your shadow for the duration of the contract. For your protection." Luca's gaze was steady, missing nothing. It swept over her, not with the predatory assessment she was used to, but with a careful, professional inventory. He gave her a curt nod, his expression unreadable. And that was it, the first crack in Alessandro's perfect plan. The briefing room was all glass and chrome, uncomfortably cold. Julian stood at the head of a sleek table, a tablet in his hand, his expression that of a man who took his job far too seriously. "All right," Julian began, tapping the screen. "Miss Vance, you will need to absorb the following dossier by tomorrow. Mr. Ricci's favorite wine is a 1982 Chateau Margaux, though he will rarely drink more than a glass. His childhood pet was a golden retriever named Enzo, who passed when he was 16. though he will tell you the dog's death was a formative experience in understanding loss. He claims to adore box cello suites, though in truth he finds them tedious, but Signora Ricci believes he is a cultured soul, so you must reinforce this. Any questions so far? Alara's head was spinning. Just one. What do I actually call him? Mr. Ricci? Alessandro. Mr. Ricci in public, Alessandro in private, but only when Signora Ricci is present. She's suspicious of formality between lovers. When you're alone with him, you may use his first name, though he likely won't respond to it. He's not particularly warm. The door opened and Luca entered, moving with that silent, predatory grace that seemed to be his default setting. He positioned himself against the far wall, a sentinel who absorbed everything while appearing to look at nothing. Alara felt her cheeks warm and quickly looked away. Now, Miss Vance, Julian continued, the support staff. You'll be interacting with the household team frequently. The head housekeeper is Mrs. Patmore. The chef is Marco. And the driver. Excuse me. A new voice interrupted from the doorway. A young woman stood there, clipboard in hand, her face apologetic. She was pretty in an unassuming way, with auburn hair pulled into a severe bun. I'm sorry to interrupt, Julian, but Signora Ricci is on the phone and she's asking about the... Thank you, Alara, Julian said crisply. Tell her I'll call back in 5 minutes. Alara froze. Her head whipped around. Alara? The young woman nodded and disappeared. Alara stared at the empty doorway, then back at Julian, then at Luca, whose eyebrow had arched almost imperceptibly. I'm sorry, Alara said slowly. Did she just... was that? Ah, Julian said, looking momentarily flustered. A rare crack in his composure. Yes, I should have mentioned. That's Alara. Alara Chin. She's Mr. Ricci's junior event coordinator. She's been with the company for 18 months. Very competent. A bit of a coincidence with the name, I suppose. A bit. Alara laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. You hired a fake girlfriend named Alara when you already have an employee named Alara? This seems like a recipe for disaster. Julian's expression remained placid. Mr. Ricci doesn't concern himself with the names of junior staff, and Signora Ricci has never met Miss Chin. There won't be any overlap. You'll be in different circles. Luca made a sound from the corner, something between a cough and a suppressed laugh. Alara glanced at him, and for just a fraction of a second, she saw genuine amusement flicker in those stormy eyes. It transformed his entire face. He was devastating when he smiled. Something funny, Luca? Julian asked, his tone clipped. Not at all, Luca replied, his voice back to that low, professional rumble. Just clearing my throat. Julian narrowed his eyes but returned to the briefing. As I was saying, the driver is Franco, and he will be. But Alara wasn't listening anymore. She was still thinking about the other Alara, the real Alara, the one who worked here, who had a life here, who probably had no idea that an actress had been hired to impersonate a fictional version of herself. The rehearsal period was a masterclass in fabricated intimacy. Under Julian's relentless tutelage, Alara learned Alessandro's life story by rote. She spent hours in the penthouse library, surrounded by leather-bound first editions that had never been opened, memorizing the tedious details of a man she was beginning to actively dislike. Alessandro, in turn, studied her like an actor learning his lines, but his performance was hollow, his touch stiff and transactional. He'd place a hand on her back, but it was as impersonal as a mannequin. He'd smile at her across a candlelit dinner table, but his eyes never warmed. He was going through the motions, treating this arrangement like any other business deal. But Luca was always there, a silent, immovable presence in the corner of the room. He'd open doors for her with a quiet deference, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. When Alessandro would make a cutting remark about her theatrical tendencies, Alara would catch a flicker of something, disapproval perhaps, in Luca's stormy eyes. It happened in the penthouse kitchen. Alara was stressed, fumbling with a complicated espresso machine, her hands shaking. She'd been up all night studying Alessandro's biography, and the caffeine was essential. The machine hissed and sputtered, refusing to cooperate. Luca appeared beside her. "Here," he murmured, his voice a low hum. "You have to hold the portafilter firmly." He gently guided her hand, his own broad and calloused, covering hers. The contact was electric, a jolt that short-circuited her carefully constructed facade. He smelled of sandalwood and clean soap, a world away from Alessandro's cloying cologne. "Thank you," she whispered, her breath catching as she looked up at him. For a moment, his professional mask slipped, and she saw a flash of raw, unguarded attraction in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that impenetrable calm. "It's my job, Miss Vance," he said, stepping back. But from then on, their interactions were charged with an unspoken current. A shared glance during a tedious dinner with Alessandro's business associates. A tiny, secret smile when she'd nail a particularly difficult piece of biographical trivia. He would leave her little things, a cup of herbal tea when he knew she was nervous, a small bar of dark chocolate on her pillow, the one she'd mentioned she loved. Alessandro remained oblivious. He was a man who saw the world in black and white, assets and liabilities. Alara was an asset, and Luca was a highly efficient piece of security equipment. He never saw the private conversations in the library, where Luca would tell her about his childhood in Tuscany, his voice softening as he described the vineyards. He never saw Alara's genuine, unforced laughter when Luca deadpanned about his cat, a portly creature named Beppo, who was the only boss he truly respected. "The first time I met Beppo," Luca told her one evening, his voice low and warm, "he was a kitten, no bigger than my hand. He was sitting on a fence post in the rain, looking at me like I was the biggest disappointment of his life." "Like you'd failed him somehow?" Alara asked, smiling. "Exactly. He had these expectations, you see, a certain standard, and I was not meeting it." Luca's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I took him home, dried him off, fed him. He ate and then he looked at me again, and I swear to you, Alara, he was already planning how to make my life difficult." "And did he?" "For 15 years, Luca confirmed. "He sleeps on my pillow. He won't eat anything but the expensive salmon pate. He meows at the door and then refuses to go through it. He is the most tyrannical creature I have ever met, and I once worked for a man who made his staff address him as Your Eminence." Alara laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep in her chest. "He sounds wonderful." "He is," Luca said softly. "He is my home." There was something in the way he said it that made Alara's heart ache. Home. What a strange and foreign concept. She'd been a working actress for 7 years, moving from one sublet to another, never staying anywhere long enough to unpack her boxes. "That sounds nice," she said quietly. "Having a home." Luca looked at her, really looked at her, and she felt seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. "You could have that too," he said. "Someday." She wanted to ask him what he meant by that. She wanted to ask him if he was offering. But the moment passed, and Julian appeared in the doorway with another round of briefing materials, and the spell was broken. The first confusion came 3 days into the arrangement. Alara was in the penthouse library, memorizing a particularly tedious section of Alessandro's biography about his time at Harvard Business School, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Alara, the floral arrangements for the gala need your approval. Can you come to the ballroom at 3? Marco," she frowned. She'd never met a Marco. She was about to reply that she had no idea what he was talking about when she remembered. The other Alara, the event coordinator. She found Julian in the hallway. "I think someone just texted me by mistake," she said, showing him the phone. Julian sighed, a sound of profound exasperation. "I'll speak to HR. They were supposed to update the contact list. Miss Chun has a similar number to the burner phone we issued you. I'll have it changed." But the messages kept coming. "Alara, The caterers need a final head count by Friday. Alara, Signora Ricci's assistant, is asking about the seating chart. Please respond. Alara, I'm sending over the revised menu. Can you confirm the dietary restrictions for the Nakamura family? Alara started replying to each one with a polite but firm. This is not Alara-chan. Please contact her directly. But the damage was done. She was building a reputation as the most unhelpful event coordinator in New York, and she didn't even work there. Luca found her in the staff break room one afternoon, staring at her phone in despair. Another one? He asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Another one, she confirmed. This one was from the head florist. She's demanding to know why I approved tulips when she specifically requested peonies. I have never approved a flower. In my life, I can barely keep a succulent alive. Luca sat down across from her, folding his large frame into the small chair with surprising grace. You know, he said, Beppo once ate an entire bouquet of roses. He was sick for 3 days. Still didn't learn his lesson. He ate a chrysanthemum last week. Despite everything, Alara laughed. Your cat is a menace. He is, Luca agreed, his eyes warm. But he's my menace. It was in moments like these, quiet, unguarded, away from Alessandro's cold scrutiny, that Alara felt most alive. She wasn't pretending with Luca. She didn't have to. The second confusion came a week later, and it was far more complicated. Alara was in Alessandro's private office, reviewing the final details of the gala with Julian. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the city sprawled beneath them, indifferent to the drama unfolding 30 floors above. Miss Vance, Julian said, his tone clipped. Signora Ricci has requested a private lunch with you tomorrow. Just the two of you. She wants to get to know the woman who has captured her son's heart. Alara's stomach dropped. Just me? No, Alessandro. Just you. It's a test. If you pass, you're in. If you fail, she'll make your life miserable until Alessandro inevitably ends the arrangement. Julian paused. I advise you not to fail. And if I don't know the answer to something, if she asks me about something that wasn't in the dossier, improvise, Julian said coldly. That's what we're paying you for. Luca, who had been standing by the door, made a small sound, almost like a growl. Alara glanced at him, but his face was expressionless. That evening, Alara was in the library, frantically reviewing her notes, when Luca appeared with a cup of chamomile tea. You'll do fine, he said quietly, setting the cup beside her. She's not as frightening as she seems. You've met her many times. She's a force of nature, yes, but she's also lonely. Her husband is distant. Her son is cold. She surrounds herself with people because she's terrified of being alone. Luca paused. Be kind to her. That's all she really wants. Alara looked up at him, surprised by the insight. You see a lot, don't you? It's my job to see, he said, to notice things, to understand people's weaknesses. And what's my weakness? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca was quiet for a long moment. His stormy eyes searched her face, and she felt like he was seeing straight through her. Past the performance, past the borrowed dresses and the rehearsed smiles. Your weakness, he said finally, is that you care too much. You're afraid of being used, but you're even more afraid of being seen as someone who isn't useful. You give pieces of yourself away because you're terrified that if you stop, people will leave. Alara felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever seen her like that. And what's yours? She whispered. He smiled, a sad, rueful smile. I'm a bodyguard who falls for the people he's supposed to protect. That's a pretty significant weakness, I'd say. The air between them seemed to thicken. Alara could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell that clean sandalwood scent that had become so familiar. She wanted to reach out and touch him. She wanted. The door opened. Alessandro strode in, not even glancing at them. Alara, he said, his tone dismissive. I need you to review the seating arrangements for the gala. My mother has decided to add another 30 guests at the last minute. He tossed a tablet onto the table in front of her, then looked up and noticed Luca. Why are you lurking? Go check the perimeter. I don't pay you to loiter. Luca's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod and left. Alara watched him go, her heart aching. The lunch with Signora Ricci was a trial by fire. They met at a private dining room at the Pierre, a sumptuous space filled with fresh flowers and white linen. Signora Ricci was already seated when Alara arrived, a tiny woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Alara, darling, Signora said, rising to kiss her on both cheeks. You look positively radiant. Alessandro is a lucky man. Thank you, Signora, Alara said, taking her seat. You're very kind. Please call me Maria. We're family now, aren't we? The old woman's smile was sharp, predatory. She was testing her, Alara knew, looking for cracks. The lunch was a minefield of questions. What did Alara's parents do? They were both teachers, but Alara had told Alessandro her father was a retired diplomat. Julian had insisted on something more impressive. Where did she go to university? Brown, but she'd actually attended a state school. What were her thoughts on the current political climate? Carefully neutral. Signora Ricci nodded along, occasionally firing off a follow-up question that seemed designed to trip her up. But Alara was an actress, and this was her most important role yet. She deflected. She charmed. She laughed at the right moments and expressed sympathy at others. Tell me about your family home, Signora said, leaning forward. Alessandro mentioned you grew up in Connecticut. How lovely. We have a property in Greenwich. Perhaps you know the area? Alara's mind raced. Connecticut. She'd never even been to Connecticut. Oh, yes, it's beautiful, she said smoothly. I spent many summers at the shore. So peaceful compared to the city. Signora's eyes narrowed slightly. Which shore? The Long Island Sound, or the... Alara? A voice interrupted from the doorway. Alara looked up to see Alara-chan, the event coordinator, standing there with a folder in her hands. She looked equally confused. I'm sorry, Alara-chan said, glancing between the two women. I was told Signora Ricci needed these documents. I didn't realize there was a meeting in. She paused, her eyes widening. Oh, another Alara. Signora Ricci's head swiveled between them. Another Alara? You mean? She turned to Alara Vance, her expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. You never mentioned you shared a name with my staff. It just came up, Alara Vance said quickly. It's a coincidence. We're not related. Indeed not, Signora said slowly. She looked at Alara-chan, then back at Alara Vance, and her eyes narrowed further. Miss Chun, what is your full name? Alara-chan, the younger woman replied. Everyone calls me Alara. And you? Signora said, turning to Alara Vance. Alara Vance. How curious. Two Alaras in the same orbit, and I only just learned of it. Alara Vance's heart was pounding. It's just a name, Signora. Just a name. Signora's tone was acid. My dear, in our world, names are everything. They carry weight. They carry reputation. They carry meaning. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And they can be terribly confusing. The rest of the lunch was a blur. Signora Ricci dismissed Alara-chan with a wave of her hand, then proceeded to interrogate Alara Vance about every aspect of her life. By the time the meal was over, Alara felt like she'd been through a war. She escaped to the lobby and called Julian. We have a problem, she said. Signora knows about the other Alara. What exactly happened? Alara explained. Julian was silent for a long moment. She's already called me, he said finally. She wants to change Miss Chen's name. She's insisting on it. Something about avoiding confusion in mixed company. That's ridiculous, Alara said. You can't just rename someone. Tell that to Signora Ricci. Julian sighed. I'll handle it. Just stay out of her way for the next few days. but staying out of Signora Ricci's way proved impossible. The next morning, Alara received a call from her agent. Alara, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Signora Ricci herself. She's offering you a permanent position as Alessandro's companion. She wants to know if you're interested in a long-term arrangement. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. What did you tell her? I told her you were currently booked for the month and we'd discuss future opportunities after that. But Alara, this is huge. She's offering twice what we're getting now. 3 times. Tell her no, Alara said firmly. This is just a 1-month contract. I'm not. Are you insane? This is the biggest payday of your career. Her agent's voice was shrill. Think about your future. Your rent. I'm not a prostitute, Alara snapped. I'm not going to sign on as some billionaire's permanent fake girlfriend. That's not what I signed up for. She hung up, her hands shaking. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was an actress and this was just another role. But somehow, pretending to be in love with Alessandro felt different. Felt wrong. Felt like a betrayal of something she couldn't quite name. She found Luca in the staff cafeteria, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up as she approached, and his expression softened. You look like you've had a morning, he observed. You have no idea. She sat down across from him, exhaling heavily. Signora Ricci wants to extend my contract. Permanently. She offered my agent 3 times my current rate. Luca's jaw tightened. Are you going to take it? No, of course not. She paused. I mean, the money would be nice, but I can't. It's not real. None of it is real. What is real? Luca asked quietly. She looked at him, really looked at him. The strong jaw, the stormy eyes, the hands that could both protect and comfort. You, she whispered. This, right now, that's real. Luca reached across the table and took her hand. It was a small gesture, hidden beneath the lip of the table, but it felt monumental. Then let's make it real, he said, for as long as we can. The gala arrived a week later, a glittering spectacle of champagne, designer gowns, and ruthless social maneuvering at the Ricci estate in the Hamptons. Alara was a vision in a deep emerald gown, her hair swept up, her smile a perfect mask. She was the perfect counterfeit girlfriend, charming Signora Ricci, deflecting the predatory wives, and gazing adoringly at Alessandro. It was the performance of her life. But even as she played her part, her eyes kept drifting to Luca. He was stationed near the terrace doors, a silent sentinel in an impeccably tailored tuxedo. He looked like a movie star, all hard angles and brooding intensity. Every time she caught his eye, she felt a thrill of connection that made the rest of the evening bearable. The confusion with the name Alara reached its peak during the gala itself. Signora Ricci, determined to avoid confusion in mixed company, had instructed all staff to address the event coordinator as Elaine for the evening. But old habits died hard, and the florist, the caterers, and half the waitstaff kept slipping up. Alara, can you check the seating chart needs. Alara, where is the... Each time, Signora Ricci's head would swivel, her eyes narrowing as she tried to determine which Alara was being addressed. By the 3rd hour, she was visibly frayed. It's absurd, she hissed to Alara Vance. I'm going to change her name officially. She can be Elena, or Eloise, something that doesn't cause this chaos. With respect, Signora, Alara said carefully, Miss Chun has been with the company for 18 months. She's built relationships. Changing her name now would. It would simplify things, Signora snapped. I don't see why you're defending her. It's not like she's family. Alara bit her tongue. She wanted to point out that she wasn't family either, that she was just a hired actress. But that would ruin everything. The evening went on. Alessandro performed his role with cold efficiency, charming his mother's friends, making speeches that were perfectly calibrated to impress. He was a machine, a perfectly programmed social robot. But when he looked at Alara, there was nothing behind his No warmth. No desire. Just calculation. Why did you kiss him? Alara found herself asking, apropos of nothing. Alessandro blinked. What? Tonight. At the opening toast. You kissed my cheek. She leaned closer, keeping her voice low. You've never done that before. You usually just smile and nod. Why the change? My mother was watching, he said flatly. She wanted to see affection. So I gave her affection. And that's all it is? Performance. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something, annoyance perhaps. What else would it be? Alara shook her head. She should have known better than to expect depth from a man like Alessandro Ricci. He was a hollow shell, a man who had traded his soul for a balance sheet. The confrontation came in the third hour of the gala. Alara had escaped to the terrace for some air, her head pounding from the champagne and the endless social maneuvering. The night was cool, and the stars were out, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. She heard the door open behind her and assumed it was Alessandro, come to drag her back inside. She was surprised when it was Luca, his broad silhouette filling the doorway. You're cold, he said, pulling off his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, and she breathed in his scent, feeling a sense of comfort she hadn't felt all night. I'm fine, she lied, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. He stood a respectful distance away, a silent sentinel. The gala's music was a muffled whisper from inside. The stars were out, and the world felt very small and very private. You look beautiful tonight, Alara, he said, his voice dropping even lower. It was the first time. He'd used her name without a miss or Vance. It was a transgression, a crack in his professional armor. It's just the dress, she whispered. It's not the dress, he countered, turning to look at her. His gaze was intense, unwavering. It's the way you smile when you think no one is watching. It's the kindness you show the staff. It's the way you make even the most ridiculous lie seem true because you feel it. He stepped closer, his voice a ragged confession. It's everything. He moved to brush a stray strand of hair from her face, his knuckles feather-light against her cheek. It was a small gesture, but it shattered the last of her defenses. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. A sharp cough shattered the spell. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury, a crystal glass of scotch in his hand. He had seen everything. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with ice. It seems my security system has a rather large, glaring vulnerability. Tell me, Luca, was this part of the protection detail, or a new, unauthorized service you're offering? It's not what it looks like, sir, Luca said, his posture ramrod straight, his face instantly a blank slate. I was merely ensuring Miss Vance didn't catch cold. Alessandro's laugh was a cruel, sharp sound. Don't insult my intelligence. You have feelings for her. He turned his predatory gaze on Alara. And you're supposed to be my girlfriend. Do you have any idea what this will do to my reputation? My mother. He was less concerned with her feelings and more with the potential embarrassment. This was a transaction gone wrong for him. The contract is void, he declared. I will pay you for the month, but you are to vacate the premises immediately. I have no use for a girlfriend who finds the hired help more interesting. The insult was aimed as much at her as it was at Luca. Alara felt the sting of tears, but she refused to cry in front of him. She pulled off the borrowed jacket and shoved it back into Luca's hands, the gesture a desperate denial of the connection they'd just forged. She looked at Alessandro, then back at Luca, whose jaw was clenched so tight a muscle pulsed in his cheek. He was struggling, she knew, caught between his duty and his heart. Fine, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I'm glad it's over. I'm glad I don't have to pretend anymore. The drive back to the city was silent. Luca was behind the wheel, his face a grim mask. He didn't look at her tiny apartment, Elara got out of the car, her heart in shreds. She'd been paid, but she felt completely bankrupt. Just as she reached her door, she heard his voice. Elara, wait. She turned. Luca was standing beside the car, looking as lost as she felt. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have. I jeopardized your job. You needed that money. It was never about the money, Luca, she said, her voice cracking. It was just pretend. It's all just pretend. Not for me, he said, taking a step forward. None of it was pretend for me. And for the first time, Elara saw the man behind the guard. The lonely man from Tuscany. The man who had been watching her with more honesty than any of Alessandro's fake smiles. He fired you, didn't he? She asked. Resigned, he corrected. The moment I saw his face. Some things are more important than a job. He stood before her, a towering figure, the city lights of Manhattan glinting in his eyes. I don't have a penthouse or a private jet, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I have a small apartment, a fat cat, and a book collection. But I have more loyalty in my little finger than Alessandro Ricci has in his entire fortune. And I would never ask you to pretend. Elara didn't answer with words. She closed the distance between them, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed him. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a transaction. It was real. It was a messy, perfect collision of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of places. When they broke apart, he looked down at her, a slow, genuine smile transforming his stony face. What happens now? She whispered. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. Now, he said, his voice a promise. We have the rest of our lives for you to not pretend. I would like that if you would. Elara smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. I would like that, she said. A block away, in the back of a chauffeured car, Alessandro Ricci's phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. Alessandro, where is that wonderful Elara? She's the only one who understood my story about the gardener. I must speak with her. Alessandro stared at the phone, then out the window. He saw a man and a woman embracing under a flickering street lamp. He saw the man's protective stance, the woman's utter trust. He saw a happiness he had never known, a genuine connection he could never buy. Another buzz, this time from Julian. Sir, I've had to change Miss Chen's name in the company directory. Signora Ricci insisted. She's now Elaine Chen. HR is furious. Mrs. Patmore is confused. The florist has sent a complaint. Also, Miss Chen, the original one, is threatening to resign. Please advise. Alessandro stared at the message, then back at the happy couple. He felt a sharp, unfamiliar pang. It was not anger. It was not humiliation. It was, he realized with a dawning, horrifying clarity, the first genuine emotion he'd felt in years. He typed out a reply to his mother. She's gone. We didn't work out. He typed another to Julian. Let Miss Chun be Elara. It's just a name. None of it matters anyway. He looked back at the happy couple, then down at his own cold, empty hands. Take me home, Julian, he said, his voice devoid of its usual steel. I don't want to see this anymore. But he couldn't unsee it. In the end, Alessandro Ricci had gotten exactly what he paid for. A brilliant performance. He just hadn't realized the most compelling show of the night wasn't the one he was starring in. It was the one he had been too blind to see, happening in the shadows, a love story he had inadvertently written the prologue for, and then been fired from. 3 weeks later, Elara Vance stood in a small kitchen in Brooklyn, trying to figure out how to use a complicated Italian espresso machine that was far too fancy for the apartment. This is ridiculous, she muttered, wrestling with the portafilter. Luca appeared behind her, his broad chest pressing against her back as he reached around to guide her hands. You have to hold it firmly, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Like this. Show off, she said, but she was smiling. Beppo, the fat tabby, sat on the counter, watching them with undisguised contempt. He'd already knocked over a salt shaker and tried to eat a basil plant. He was clearly the boss of this house. "I think Beppo likes me," Alara said. "He's planning your demise," Luca replied. "That's how he shows affection." She laughed, leaning back against him. It was strange how quickly this had become home. The small apartment with the mismatched furniture, the scent of sandalwood and coffee, the weight of Luca's arms around her, solid and real. "I talked to my agent today," she said. "I got a call back for that indie film. The one about the baker." "That's wonderful," Luca said, kissing her temple. "You're going to be a star." "I'm going to be a working actress," she corrected. "That's more than enough." He spun her around to face him, his stormy eyes soft. "You're going to be everything," he said. "You already are." Across town, in the corporate headquarters of Ricci Industries, Alara Chen, the original Alara, sat at her desk, staring at her computer. The name change had been reversed. She was Alara again. No more Elaine. No more confusion. But the past few weeks had left their mark. She'd received hundreds of misdirected emails. She'd been yelled at by florists. She'd been told to change her name by the formidable Signora Ricci. She'd been nearly fired and then reinstated. It had been, without question, the most chaotic period of her professional life. She'd also heard rumors. Whispers about a temporary employee with her same name. Rumors about the head of security resigning in dramatic fashion. Stories about the gala, about a scene on the terrace, about a love affair that had bloomed in the shadows of the penthouse. She didn't know the full story. She didn't need to, but she couldn't help smiling as she looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, her namesake was probably living her best life. And Alara Chen, the real Alara, the one who had built her career from scratch, was finally getting some peace. She deleted the last of the misdirected emails, poured herself a glass of wine, and resolved never to ask questions. Some mysteries, she decided, were better left unsolved. A month later, Alessandro Ricci sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by his minimalist furniture and his astronomical net worth. The city sprawled beneath him, indifferent to his existence. His mother had stopped calling. His business associates were wary of his cold moods. The penthouse felt emptier than ever. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. There, under E, were two names. Alara Vance. He'd never called her. It was the burner phone number Julian had issued her. He could probably delete it. Alara Chen, his event coordinator. The one who'd nearly resigned over the whole name debacle. He'd never actually met her properly. She was just a name on an org chart. He stared at both names for a long moment. Then he put the phone down and walked to the window. He could see the lights of Brooklyn in the distance. He could imagine, if he tried, two people in a small apartment, laughing over a misbehaving cat. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not jealousy, not regret. It was something simpler, something he'd never really experienced. Loneliness. "Take me home, Julian," he whispered to the empty room. But he was already home. He just didn't know how to live there. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you found this story interesting, please consider giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you want to hear plenty more stories just like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more to unpack in future videos. See you soon.